I had always been fascinated by the unknown, the eerie, the unexplained. My insatiable curiosity led me down paths most people feared to tread. Little did I know that my journey into the realm of the supernatural would take me to a place darker than any I had ever imagined. It was a moonless night when I received a cryptic message from an old friend. Sarah, whom I had not seen in years, beckoned me to a forsaken chapel deep in the woods. Her message was shrouded in fear and desperation. She claimed that something unholy had taken root within her, and she needed my help. How could I ignore her plea? The chapel stood at the edge of a forgotten cemetery, surrounded by gnarled trees that reached out like skeletal fingers towards the heavens. The wind whispered secrets, and the rustling leaves masked the sound of my apprehensive footsteps. As I pushed open the chapel door, a chilling gust of wind greeted me, extinguishing the candlelight that flickered inside. The scene that unfolded before me was like something from a nightmare. Sarah was strapped to a weathered wooden pew, her once vibrant eyes now empty voids. A group of individuals, their faces obscured by hooded robes, encircled her. In their hands, they clutched ancient books, bound in cracked leather. The air was heavy with the stench of burning sage and the eerie chant that emanated from their lips. I watched in horrified fascination as Sarah's body convulsed, her limbs contorting in unnatural ways. She let out guttural screams that echoed through the chapel, chilling me to the bone. Her voice was no longer her own. It was a wretched, otherworldly sound that seemed to defy the laws of nature. One of the hooded figures, the apparent leader, stepped forward. His voice was low and guttural as he spoke words in a language I could not comprehend. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, and a malevolent presence seemed to permeate every corner of the chapel. I could feel it clawing at the edges of my sanity, threatening to pull me into its abyss. As the exorcism continued, I became aware of a dark, shadowy figure lurking in the corners of the chapel. It moved silently, almost imperceptibly, but its presence was unmistakable. It was as if the very darkness itself had taken form, an embodiment of the evil that had ensnared Sarah. I dared not speak of it, for fear that acknowledging its existence would invite it closer. Sarah's torment intensified, her body writhing with a grotesque elegance that defied the limits of human capability. The hooded figures pressed on, their voices growing louder and more desperate. I felt a sense of dread building within me, a suffocating feeling that threatened to overwhelm my senses. The shadowy figure in the corner seemed to draw strength from Sarah's suffering. It pulsed with malevolence, its shape shifting and contorting in the dim light. I could no longer deny its presence, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I realized that it was aware of my gaze. Time lost all meaning in that chapel of horrors. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes stretched into eternity. The exorcism seemed to be a battle of wills, a struggle between the forces of light and the abyss. I questioned my own sanity, wondering if I had stumbled into a nightmare from which I could never wake. Then, in a sudden burst of unearthly light, Sarah's body went limp. The hooded figures fell silent, their chanting abruptly cut short. The oppressive energy that had filled the chapel dissipated, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Sarah's eyes, once vacant and lifeless, flickered with recognition. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, as if she had just emerged from a long, dark tunnel. It was a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The shadowy figure, no longer confined to the corner, surged forward with a terrifying ferocity. It enveloped Sarah, its inky tendrils wrapping around her like a sinister cocoon. Her screams returned, more agonized than before, as if the demon was exacting its revenge for being banished. The hooded figures, their faces etched with exhaustion, rushed forward. They brandished crucifixes and vials of holy water, their faith the only weapon they had against this malevolent entity. The chapel became a battleground between the forces of good and evil, and I was caught in the middle. In the chaos that ensued, I felt a searing pain in my chest, as if a knife had been thrust into my heart. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The room seemed to spin, and I could hear distant voices, distorted and echoing as if from another world. As my consciousness faded, I caught a final glimpse of Sarah. Her body was racked with torment, but her eyes, though filled with fear, also held a glimmer of hope. It was a hope that defied the darkness, a hope that told me the battle was far from over. When I awoke, I was alone in the chapel. The hooded figures and the shadowy entity gone. I stumbled out into the moonlit night, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something beyond human comprehension, something that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my days. Sarah was never the same after that night. She bore the scars of her ordeal, both physical and emotional. We drifted apart, our connection forever tainted by the horrors we had faced together. I often find myself haunted by the memory of that chapel, the chilling presence of the shadowy figure, and the realization that evil can lurk in the most unexpected of places. It is a reminder that there are forces in this world that defy explanation, that challenge our understanding of reality, and that, once witnessed, can never truly be forgotten.